It was barely 7 a.m. when my phone lit up with Judith's name. My stomach tightened the way it always did whenever my mother-in-law decided she needed something from me, which was often and always urgent, according to her. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Good morning, Judith." "Oh, Emily," she sighed dramatically as if I had already disappointed her. "I'm so relieved you answered. I was worried you'd try to ignore my call again." I looked around my kitchen, still cluttered from last night's late work session. My laptop sat open with spreadsheets waiting for me, my coffee machine sputtered tiredly in the corner, and my planner, color-coded out of desperation not creativity, had deadlines circled so aggressively the paper had nearly torn. "I haven't ignored any of your calls," I said softly. "I've just been busy." "Well, you won't be too busy this Saturday," Judith declared. "The hedges need trimming. The driveway is filthy. And the gutter above the garage is sagging in a terrible way. I told Mark, but you know how he is, busy," she mimicked, full of disdain. "So naturally it falls on you." Naturally. The way she said it made something tilt inside me just slightly, like a picture frame knocked crooked on a wall. Small but noticeable enough to stop you mid-step. "Judith," I started, "I really can't this weekend. I have a Monday deadline and—" "Oh, sweetheart," she interrupted, instantly sharpening the word until it sliced. "You sit at a computer all day. How exhausting can that possibly be? You're 35, not 85. Your back works perfectly fine. And the HOA already warned me once. If they find me again, we'll all have a problem on our hands. Not, I'll have a problem. We'll have a problem." As if I was a co-owner of her home. As if my entire life revolved around the state of her gutters. I rubbed my temple. "Judith, I've already helped every weekend for—" "Nonsense," she snapped. "Helping family isn't something you keep score on. Besides, since I don't have daughters of my own, you should be stepping up without me having to ask." There was the line she used every time. She didn't have daughters, so I should act like one. Sacrifice like one. Serve like one. Even though I had my own job. My own home. My own life. Behind me from the living room, I heard the faint sound of Mark's video game. He always seemed to disappear into headphones whenever his mother called, as if muting the problem would make it go away. "Judith," I said slowly, "I've already put in a lot of hours. And this Saturday," she cut in brightly, "you'll put in a few more. 10 a.m. Don't be late. The neighbors already think poorly of us because of those weeds, and I won't be embarrassed in my own neighborhood." The line went dead. She had hung up. Just like that. My weekend, my time, my boundaries, all decided for me. I stared at the blank phone screen, feeling something tight coil inside my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter, heavier. A realization that had been building for far too long. This wasn't helping anymore. This was servitude. And Judith wasn't going to stop asking. Not unless I made her. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd spend my weekends elbow deep in mulch at my mother-in-law's house, I would have laughed. Back then I thought Judith simply needed a little extra help. A ride to an appointment. A hand with the groceries. A light bulb changed. Nothing serious. Nothing consuming. Nothing that would swallow every spare hour of my life the way it eventually did. It started during our first year of marriage on a Sunday afternoon, when Mark casually mentioned that his mom's faucet was leaking. "She tried to fix it herself," he said with that sheepish smile of his. The one he saved for moments when he knew he was asking too much. "But you're better with tools than I am. Could you maybe take a look?" I remember laughing. Sure. How hard can it be? And that was my first mistake, making it look easy. 5 minutes later the faucet was fixed. Judith praised me like I had rebuilt her entire kitchen. And I walked away thinking I'd just scored approval points with my new mother-in-law. I didn't realize I had just accepted a job. The next week it was a clogged drain. Then a stuck garage door. Then a small patio cleaning that took 3 hours and left my arms shaking. She always thanked me profusely in the moment. Cookies, a hug, a dramatic sigh of relief. But the gratitude evaporated as soon as she needed something else. Which was always. Some people ask. Judith expected. "Emily is so capable," she'd tell her neighbors proudly, standing beside me like I was her hired help. "She just knows how to handle things. Not like me. I'm useless with anything physical." And every time she'd shoot Mark a pointed look that said, "Unlike my son who can't even hang a picture straight." He'd laugh it off nervously. Avoid eye contact. Pretend he didn't see the comparison. Mark wasn't a bad man. He just grew up under Judith's thumb. Guilt, pressure, obligation braided so tightly together that he couldn't tell where her needs ended and his began. He'd watched his mother bulldoze through life with tears and manipulation, and avoiding conflict had become his survival skill. So when she pushed, he stepped aside. And I stepped in. At first willingly. Then resentfully. Then automatically, like a reflex I couldn't unlearn. The worst part was how innocent it looked on paper. Helping your mother-in-law. Being part of the family. Pitching in. But somehow, in the quiet accumulation of favors, I had become the unpaid caretaker of a house I didn't live in. One I didn't even like visiting, while my own life shrank around the edges. Deadlines squeezed into evenings. Social plans cancelled. Weekends vanished into yard waste bags and Judith's endless commentary. You missed a spot. You should really trim lower than that. A real landscaper would know better. Somewhere along the way she stopped asking if I could help and began telling me what I would do. And what stunned me most was not her entitlement, though it was breathtaking, it was how natural it felt to comply. I had been raised to be useful. To be agreeable. To keep the peace. But peace built on exhaustion is not peace at all. It's surrender. And one ordinary August morning, standing in my messy kitchen with my phone still hot from Judith's call, I finally saw it clearly. I wasn't part of the family. I was part of the infrastructure. And Judith had no intention of ever letting me off her payroll. Except of course she wasn't paying. Not yet. The HO envelope was sitting on Judith's kitchen counter when I arrived the following week. White, crisp, and positioned just so, like she wanted it to be the very first thing I saw when I walked in. Finally, she said, sweeping into the kitchen as if summoned by my footsteps. You have no idea how long I've been waiting. She pushed the envelope toward me with 2 fingers, as though it personally offended her. I picked it up and scanned the words that jumped out immediately. Violation notice. Property maintenance required. Second warning. Possible fine. $650. I swallowed. Judith, this is dated last month. Why didn't you tell me? She crossed her arms. Because I assumed you would take care of things before they escalated. The yard has been looking dreadful for weeks. The neighbors have been talking. Talking. Of course. Judith cared what the neighbors thought more than she cared about anything else in this world, including my time, my job, or the fact that I had spent the last 6 weekends pulling her weeds while she stood nearby critiquing my technique. I've been doing as much as I can, I said quietly. But I can't get everything done alone. Mark should help too, she snapped, though she didn't sound like she believed it for even a second. But he's always busy. Useless boy. So that leaves you. There it was again, that heavy, absolute declaration that settled over me like a net. Believes you. Not can you help? Not do you have time? Just an expectation wrapped in a guilt trip. Judith plucked the letter from my hands and shook it like a rattle. This is what happens when you let things slide. If we get fined, you will help me fight it. We. I echoed. Well, of course. I can't exactly argue with the HOA on my own. They respect documentation, photos, proof of maintenance. That's your specialty, isn't it? She tilted her head, a faux sweet smile stretching across her face. You're so organized. If only she knew how true that was. If only she knew what had been growing quietly on my laptop for the last few months. My own documentation. My photos. My time logs. My spreadsheets. But she wasn't talking about that. Judith tapped her perfectly manicured nail on the notice. So here's what's going to happen. On Saturday you're going to redo the hedges. Properly this time, not like last month. Then power wash the driveway. And the patio. And there's mold on the siding. I saw it yesterday while watering the roses. I can't do all that in one day, I said. It's too much. Oh, Emily. Her tone softened into something far more dangerous. Pity mixed with superiority. That's the problem with your generation. Everything feels like too much to you. My mother used to scrub her entire house by hand every week. She never complained. She didn't even own a dishwasher. I bit down on the inside of my cheek. Judith adored these stories, little monuments to her family's suffering that she used to shame anyone who didn't measure up. I drew a slow breath. Judith, I have a full-time job. I can't keep doing. He cut me off with a laugh, loud and dismissive. Your job is not that demanding. And besides, Mark told me your boss lets you work from home sometimes. So what's the problem? You have plenty of flexibility. I stared at her. Working from home doesn't mean I'm not working. Well, if you managed your time better, she said briskly, you could finish all this without being dramatic. Dramatic. That word landed on me like a hammer. I wasn't dramatic. I was drowning. And Judith, with that bright, oblivious smile, was still piling more weight onto my shoulders. She stepped closer. So, Saturday. 10 o'clock. Don't be late. I've already told the neighbors you'd be here. It will be embarrassing if you don't show. There was the ultimatum, wrapped in shame, dressed as family obligation. At that moment, the quiet coil inside me tightened just a little more. Not snapping yet. Not fully awake. But shifting, stretching, preparing. Judith mistook my silence for agreement. Wonderful, she chirped, sweeping past me toward the living room. Oh, and wear something more presentable this time. The couple next door had company last weekend, and I don't want them thinking my daughter-in-law dresses like a landscaper. She left the room without waiting for a response. Good. Because I didn't trust myself to speak. I stared down at the HOA letter in my hand. A fine. A warning. A threat. And Judith's complete certainty that I was the one responsible for preventing it. As if I owned the house. As if I had ever chosen any of this. But standing there holding that letter, I felt something new. Something sharp. Something alive. If Judith wanted documentation so badly, well, she was about to get far more than she asked for. That night, after another argument with Mark that neither of us meant to have, I sat alone at our dining table with my laptop open. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that settles in after you've cried in the shower, dried off, and pretended everything is fine. Mark had gone to bed early. He hated conflict, especially when it involved his mother. But I couldn't sleep. Not with that HO letter replaying in my head, not with Judith's voice echoing. You have plenty of flexibility. Don't be dramatic. You'll take care of it. Like I was an appliance, a tool, a resource to be used until it broke. My hands shook slightly as I opened a blank spreadsheet. I wasn't sure why I did it, habit maybe. I was an administrative manager. Organization was the one thing I could always control. The first column I labeled task. The next, date. Then hours worked. Then, market rate. Then, total value. And slowly, almost unwillingly, I began typing. Weeding front and backyard. 5 hours. $45 per hour. Power washing patio. 4 hours. $60 per hour. Gutter cleaning. 3 hours. $85 per hour. Driveway spot treatment. 2 hours. $50 per hour. Garage door repair assist. 1.5 hours. $75 per hour. Hedge trimming. 6 hours. $70 per hour. Row after row, month after month, weekend after weekend, I filled in the tasks Judith had demanded of me. Not requested. Demanded. I scrolled further down. More tasks appeared. Ones I'd almost forgotten about. The day she made me repaint her entire porch because the painter was too expensive. The afternoon she insisted the fence panel be replaced immediately because the neighbors were judging her. The time she called me crying because her roses looked depressed and needed emergency pruning. I typed it all. Hours. 67.5. Then 72. Then 81. I sat back staring at the total. 81 hours of labor. Unpaid. Unacknowledged. Expected. I pulled up a local landscaping company's website. Their rates confirmed what I already suspected. Judith had essentially extracted over $4,800 worth of work from me since spring. My hand flew to my mouth. It wasn't the money that stunned me. It was the proof. Concrete evidence of something I had felt so deeply but had never fully measured. Judith didn't rely on me. She used me. It was all there in neat color-coded lines. My weekends. My energy. My boundaries eroded cell by cell on the screen. I added photos next. Ones I had taken accidentally, thinking I might show Mark someday what her quick tidy-up actually entailed. Photos of me covered in dirt. Blistered palms. A torn shirt. Judith standing behind me with her arms folded, supervising like a foreman. When I attached each image to the spreadsheet, a strange calm settled over me. A clarity that didn't feel angry so much as final. I whispered the words aloud, testing how they tasted. Enough. The moment I said it, I knew. Something had shifted permanently. This wasn't a list anymore. This wasn't a tally. This was a bill. A bill for time Judith had taken. A bill for labor she felt entitled to. A bill she never imagined I'd actually calculate. But I had. And now I couldn't unsee the truth staring back at me. Judith had stolen my time. And time was the one thing I was done giving away for free. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and exhaled shakily. Saturday was coming. And Judith had no idea that for the first time in years, I wasn't arriving as her helper. I was arriving as someone who finally understood her own worth. Saturday morning arrived heavy and gray, the kind of sky that felt like it was holding its breath. I pulled into Judith's driveway at exactly 10 a.m., the time she had dictated, as if I were a contractor she had hired, not her daughter-in-law coming on her only day off. She was already outside waiting for me. Arms crossed. Expression pinched. Judgment radiating off her like heat. "You're late," she announced, even though I wasn't. "The neighbors have been out since 9. It looks terrible that you showed up second." As if we were in some kind of competition I was failing. "I'm here," I said simply. Judith sniffed like that wasn't good enough. She thrust a pair of dull hedge trimmers into my hands. "Start with these. And do it properly this time, Emily. Last month you cut them unevenly." Mrs. Farley pointed it out to me. Mrs. Farley, her 72-year-old neighbor, who trimmed her own bushes with military precision and gave unsolicited advice as a hobby. "Okay," I said, even though every muscle in my body tensed. I walked to the hedges, and as soon as I crouched down to begin trimming, I heard Judith call out. Not to me but loudly enough for the neighborhood to hear. "She's finally doing something about it. I swear if I didn't stay on her, nothing around here would ever get done." My chest tightened. My vision flickered. I kept cutting. 10 minutes later I felt a sting along my knuckles. I'd scraped them against a branch. Blood dotted the leaves. "You should really be more careful," Judith chided, stepping closer as if inspecting a defective product. "If you hurt yourself, who do you expect to finish?" I stood slowly. For a moment I couldn't even breathe. But she was already moving on, gesturing toward the driveway. "Once you finish the bushes you need to power wash. And don't forget the siding. Last time you missed." My voice broke through hers without warning. "Judith. Stop." She blinked at me, startled. She wasn't used to being interrupted. "What did you say?" I swallowed, steadying myself. "I said stop. Just stop." Her eyes narrowed. "Are you having a mood today? Because I don't have time for moods. We have a lot of work." "No," I said louder this time. "You have a lot of expectations." Judith's mouth fell open, offended and confused at once. "I beg your pardon?" I wiped my bloody hand on my jeans, feeling the tremor of something rising inside me, something that had been dormant too long. "Do you realize," I said, "I've spent every weekend here for months? Do you realize how much time this takes from my own life? From my job? From everything else I'm supposed to be doing?" "Oh please," she scoffed. "Everyone helps their parents. This is what family does." "You're dramatic, Emily. Dramatic and ungrateful." Ungrateful. That word hit harder than the scraped knuckles. I stood there, holding the rusty trimmers, listening to the woman who had drained 81 hours of my life tell me I wasn't grateful enough. Something inside me exhaled, quiet and decisive. "This is the last time," I said. Judith's face twisted. "The last time for what?" "For all of this." I gestured around the yard. "I won't be doing your maintenance anymore." Her laugh was sharp and disbelieving. "Oh, don't be ridiculous. You'll come next week. You always do." "No," I said, my voice suddenly calm. "I won't." Judith stared at me for a long second, trying to process a reality in which I no longer obeyed her. And then, predictably, she snapped. "You listen to me, young lady. If these hedges aren't finished today, the HOA is going to find me, and that will be on you. Not me. You caused this by not keeping up. You are responsible." "I'm not responsible for your home," I cut in softly. "And I never should have been." Judith's face went red. "Where is Mark?" "Inside," I said, hiding from this conversation. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. I stepped forward and placed the hedge trimmers on the lawn between us like a final offering. I'm done, Judith. Truly done. He sputtered. You can't just quit. You can't just walk away from obligations. But I already had. I turned and headed for my car, feeling Judith's outrage burn into my back. She shouted something else, my name maybe. Accusations. I didn't turn around to find out. My hands were shaking as I opened the car door. Not from fear. From freedom. Because Judith thought I had just walked out on yard work. She had no idea I'd spent the last 3 nights preparing something far more explosive than a trimmed hedge. A document she would receive very, very soon. And when she opened it, Judith would finally understand. I hadn't been her daughter-in-law. I had been her unpaid contractor. And contractors send invoices. I drove straight to my friend Natalie's house after leaving Judith's yard behind. My hands were still trembling on the steering wheel, not from fear but from the aftershock of finally saying no. Natalie opened the door before I even knocked twice. She took one look at my scraped knuckles, the dirt still clinging to my jeans, and she didn't ask a single stupid question. She just said, "Oh God, what did she do this time?" I stepped inside, and the moment the door closed behind me, everything I'd been holding in, all the frustration, the exhaustion, the shame I didn't want to admit I felt, rushed to the surface. I walked out, I said. I told her no. Natalie blinked. You told her no. Her voice wasn't mocking, just astonished. And then her expression softened. Good. About time. I sank onto her couch, feeling the cushions give way beneath me like a relief I hadn't known I needed. I made a spreadsheet, I whispered, half embarrassed and half proud. I logged everything. Every hour. Every task. Natalie's eyebrows lifted. And it comes out to over $4,000 in labor. She let out a low whistle. Emily, that's not helping. That's exploitation. I stared at my hands, the dirt under my nails, the tiny streaks of dried blood. I know. I think I've always known. I just didn't want to admit it. Natalie sat across from me, leaning forward. You have to stop letting her pretend you're responsible for her house. She's weaponizing guilt. And Mark, she hesitated. He's not stopping her. No, I said quietly. He just avoids her until it becomes my problem. Natalie nodded sadly. That's how he grew up. He learned to disappear so she wouldn't pick at him. But she picked you instead. And you let it happen because you're, soft. I asked. Generous, she corrected. But generosity without boundaries turns into servitude. The truth of that scraped at something deep inside me. I swallowed. I don't know what to do next. I walked away, but she's not going to let it go. The HOA notice alone, she'll blame me forever. Natalie didn't flinch. Then make her face the reality she's been ignoring. I frowned. What reality? He pointed at my laptop bag. You've already done half the work. You documented everything. Now turn it into something she can't dismiss. I stared at her. Like what? A summary. No, Natalie's voice was firm. An invoice. My heart thudded in my chest. You're joking. She shook her head. Contractor's bill for labor. Caregiver's bill for labor. House maintenance worker's bill for labor. And you've been all 3. If she wants to treat you like staff, then she can pay you like staff. I let the idea sink in. It sounded insane. It sounded petty. It sounded fair. Emily, she said gently, what has Judith ever given you except more work? More demands? More guilt? She doesn't listen when you ask for respect. She doesn't stop when you say you're overwhelmed. But money, Natalie's smile was thin and knowing. Money is the only language she speaks fluently. I thought of Judith's designer shoes, her spotless porch, her obsession with what the neighbors thought. I thought of her dismissing my job, my time, my worth. And for the first time I felt no guilt imagining her face when she saw the total. She'll explode, I whispered. Oh, definitely, Natalie said. But she'll also finally understand that your time isn't free. I opened my bag, pulled out my laptop, and placed it on her coffee table. Natalie handed me a glass of water like it was a ritual. Ready? She asked. I nodded even though I wasn't sure. But the moment I opened the spreadsheet, the rows and hours and photos staring back at me, something in me locked into place. Determination. Clarity. A spine I didn't know I had. I'm doing it, I said quietly. I'm sending her a bill. Natalie smiled. And that, my friend, is the first real boundary you've set in years. I sat back, breathing steadily for the first time all day. Judith wanted to play this like a business transaction? Fine. Then she could receive one. And this time it would cost her. That night, after I got home from Natalie's, I sat at my desk with the lights off. The only glow in the room came from my laptop screen, the spreadsheet open like a quiet accusation. I scrolled through the rows slowly, letting each line sink into me fully. 81 hours. Not counting the emotional labor. Not counting the rearranged work schedules. Not counting the weekends lost forever. Just the tasks. Just the time. Just the labor she treated like oxygen, automatic and free. I clicked New Document. And then I began. Invoice number 001. Household maintenance and labor services provided to Judith Morgan. I typed my name beneath it. Not Emily, your daughter-in-law. Not Emily, who's supposed to help because family. Just Emily, a person who had done work. Work that deserved acknowledgement. Under Bill 2, I typed Judith's full name and home address. My fingers trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of honesty finally spoken on paper. Line by line, I transferred each task from the spreadsheet. Hedge trimming, 3 sessions. Gutter cleaning, 2 sessions. Power washing patio driveway siding. Weeding front and backyard, multiple weekends. Porch repainting. Fence panel replacement. Emergency rose pruning. Hours worked. Market rate. Total. Each number felt like an exhale. Each line item a piece of myself reclaimed. When I reached the bottom, I added everything together. Total due, $4,862.50. Payment terms, 30 days. Service notes. All labor was performed voluntarily but under repeated obligation and expectation. Further unpaid work will not be provided. I stared at the total for a long time. It didn't feel vindictive. It didn't even feel confrontational. It simply felt true. A truth Judith had never once considered, that my time had value. I attached the photos next. All those little snapshots I had taken absent-mindedly over the months. Evidence of how much harder the work was than Judith ever pretended. One photo stopped me cold. It was from early spring. Me on my knees in the mud, hair stuck to my forehead, wearing gloves ripped from overuse. And in the background, Judith. Arms crossed. Supervising. Like she was inspecting a staff member she wasn't impressed with. I felt a steady calm settle over me as I attached the image. Then I wrote the email. Subject. Invoice for services rendered. Judith. Attached is a detailed invoice for all household maintenance, yard work and repairs I have performed for you over the past several months. These tasks required significant time and labor, and I have documented everything thoroughly. Moving forward, I will not be providing unpaid work for your property. If you need ongoing assistance, please hire licensed professionals or service providers. Payment terms are listed on the invoice. Emily. No apologies. No explanations. No softening the blow. I stared at the message, my cursor blinking like it was holding its breath. And then with one controlled exhale I hit send. The message whooshed away, and the moment it left my screen my entire body went still. I sat back in my chair, the quiet in the room settling around me like a blanket. For the first time in years I wasn't waiting for Judith's approval. Or her gratitude. Or her next demand. I had drawn a line. A real one. Straight. Unmistakable. Judith had taken my time for granted. Now she would finally understand the cost. Judith called me 8 times before noon. I didn't answer. I sat on the couch with my coffee growing cold in my hands, watching her name flash across the screen, disappear, then reappear like a relentless tide. Each time Mark glanced over from his desk, anxiety flickering in his eyes. She's persistent today, he said weakly. Persistent wasn't the word. Judith was a storm. The kind that tore through everything in its path until someone, usually me, stepped in to absorb the damage. At 12:17 p.m. my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text. Call me immediately. This is unbelievable, Emily. I didn't respond. A few minutes later. What is this invoice? Are you out of your mind? I set my phone face down on the coffee table. Mark cleared his throat. You sent her something? I turned to him slowly. He winced like he already knew the answer. Yes, I said. I sent her an invoice. For all the work I've done for her. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. An invoice. Like with money. Yes. Because it was labor. And it was expected. And it wasn't free. Mark rubbed the back of his neck the way he did when his mind was sprinting to catch up. You know she's going to lose her mind. I know, I said calmly. Another call buzzed. I ignored it. Mark hesitated. Couldn't you just talk to her instead? I leveled my gaze at him. Talking never worked. With her, talking means I listen while she tells me what I'm already doing wrong. He didn't argue. He couldn't. He'd seen it. The phone buzzed again. This time I answered, not to speak but to end the cycle. I pressed accept, lifted the phone to my ear, and before Judith could speak I said, Judith, I'm not discussing this on the phone. Her voice came through sharp and trembling with outrage. How dare you send me something like this? $4,800? Are you insane? Are you trying to bankrupt me? That's the fair market rate for the labor I performed, I said. Every hour is documented. Every task is listed. This is family, she shrieked. Family doesn't charge money. Family doesn't exploit either, I said quietly. Judith gasped like I had slapped her. Exploit. I gave you a place in this family. I accepted you as my daughter. And this is how you repay us. The bills. With threats. No one threatened you, I said. I performed work. You expected it. Now I'm setting a boundary. You're being dramatic, she snapped. Just apologize, Emily. Take it back. We'll pretend this never happened. No, I said simply. The silence on the line was instant, solid, and heavy. No, she echoed as if it were a foreign word. No, I repeated, steady and calm. I'm not taking it back. And I'm not doing any more work on your house. You'll need to hire professionals. By God, Judith whispered. You're really doing this. You're actually doing this. Yes. Her breath hitched, sharp and furious. Fine. You want to play hardball? Then you leave me no choice. I'm calling Mark. I'm right here, Mark said quietly from across the room. Judith paused, then her voice softened, suddenly sweet, dripping with manipulation. Oh honey, did you know what your wife has done? Mark swallowed. Yeah, Mom. I know. And you're allowing this? She demanded. He looked at me. I saw fear, conflict, love, and guilt all twisting inside him. But then he said, voice low. I'm not in charge of Emily. She made her decision. Judith sucked in an outraged breath. Unbelievable. You're both ungrateful. Everything your father and I sacrificed. I ended the call. Just like that. Clean. Final. Quiet. My hands were steady as I placed the phone back on the table. Mark looked at me for a long moment. She's going to keep trying. I know, I said. But I'm done. Something in his shoulders softened. Not relief exactly, but an understanding he'd never reached before. For the first time in our marriage he saw the line I had drawn. And he didn't ask me to move it. That afternoon Judith sent 14 more texts. 2 voicemails. 1 email. Each message angrier than the last. But for once I didn't answer. Because Judith thought this was the fight. She didn't know the fight was already over. I wasn't arguing anymore. I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't begging to be heard. I had said no. And this time the word stuck. Judith went silent for almost 24 hours. Not a call. Not a text. Not a passive-aggressive group message to me and Mark. Silence. It was the kind of quiet that didn't feel like peace at all. It felt like a storm pulling itself together on the horizon, gathering strength. And right on cue the storm hit. At 8:12 the next morning my phone pinged with a new message. Not from Judith. From the HOA. I stared at the subject line. Property maintenance concerns. Documentation received. For a moment I didn't understand. Documentation? Received from where? Then the email opened and everything became crystal clear. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, we received forwarded materials regarding the maintenance of your property, including photographic evidence and a record of third-party labor, attached. We would like to discuss these materials prior to assessing any fines. Oh God, I whispered. Judith must have tried to use my invoice, to fight the HOA warning. I could picture it perfectly, her walking into the management office, waving the printed pages like a golden ticket. "See? My daughter-in-law has been handling everything. Look at all this work she does." But instead of proving she was responsible, she proved I had been doing all the labor, and that she had ignored the first warning, and that she had no grounds to complain about the second. The HOA had taken my detailed list, my photos, my timestamps, and treated it exactly how it read, as professional labor. Judith had accidentally confirmed everything I'd ever claimed. I barely had time to process this before my phone vibrated again, violently this time. "Judith." I answered, more out of shock than choice. Her voice exploded through the speaker so loudly I flinched. "How could you do this to me?" I blinked. "Do what?" "You know very well what. The HOA called me today. They said you submitted documents saying you did the work. They said I ignored their letters. They said I'm responsible for the condition of the property." "I didn't submit anything," I said. "But if you gave them my invoice." "Of course I gave it to them," she screeched. "I thought it would defend me. I thought it would prove I wasn't neglecting my house." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Judith, an invoice proves labor was performed. It doesn't prove you responded to the first notice. And it doesn't prove you asked for help on time." "They're fining me," she wailed. $650. And they told me to hire professionals moving forward. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" I exhaled slowly. "It sounds like they gave you clear instructions." "Oh, don't you dare play innocent with me," she spat. "This is your fault." "No," I said evenly. "It's the consequence of choosing free labor over professional help." Judith gasped like she'd been physically struck. "You ungrateful little..." She cut herself off, breath ragged. Then her voice shifted, still sharp but laced with something new. "Fear. And that invoice," she whispered urgently. "It's not real, is it? You're not actually expecting me to pay it, Emily. Tell me you're not doing this. Tell me this isn't how far you're willing to go." I thought of my scraped knuckles, my cancelled weekends, my shrinking life, my spreadsheet full of hours she never even thanked me for. Then I thought of the number at the bottom. $4,862.50. "It's real," I said quietly. Judith made a strangled sound on the other end. "You're threatening your own family for money." "No," I replied. "I'm billing someone who used my labor without consent or compensation." "That's the same thing." "It's really not," I said. Her breathing quickened, almost frantic now. "I can't pay this. I won't pay this. I won't." "You have 30 days, I said. "If you need more time we can discuss a payment plan." "A payment plan?" she shrieked. "Are you out of your mind?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because beneath her fury, beneath the insults and theatrics, I finally heard the truth. Judith wasn't angry because I billed her. She was terrified because she knew she owed it. She had mocked me, dismissed me, used me, and now the bill had come due. "You're going to regret this," she whispered. "I'll make sure of it." But her voice shook. And for the first time since marrying into this family I realized. Judith wasn't invincible. She was just loud. And now she was scared. Because she had lost control. Judith stopped calling. She didn't stop sending messages, of course. She would never give up the opportunity to perform indignation. But the calls stopped entirely. Silence was her new strategy. Retreat and regroup. Lick her wounds and wait for the perfect moment to strike back. I knew it was only a matter of time. That moment came exactly 2 weeks later. I was at work, cleaning out my inbox when an email notification popped up. Small Claims Court, case filing notification. For a long second the words blurred. Then they sharpened. Filed by Judith Morgan. Claim, unlawful harassment, fabricated charges, emotional distress. I read the claim twice, then a third time. She was suing me. For sending her a bill for labor. That she had used my own documentation to prove I did. I sat back in my chair stunned, but only for a moment. Then slowly a laugh bubbled up in my chest. It wasn't humorous. It was tired. Hollow. Almost gentle. Of course she would file first. Of course she would try to control the narrative. Of course she would try to paint herself as the victim. Judith didn't fight fair. He fought loud. I forwarded the notice to Mark. A moment later he called. I don't know what to say," he murmured. She didn't tell me she was doing this. Did you expect her to? I asked softly. He sighed, the sound heavy with old patterns and familiar helplessness. No. But I didn't expect her to take it this far either. She cornered herself, I said. The HOA fine, the invoice, the fact that she finally realized I wasn't going back to being her free labor force. Suing me is her last attempt to regain control. What are you going to do? He asked. I closed the email. Open my spreadsheet. Open my invoice. Open the folder of photos, timestamps, text messages, and every shred of evidence Judith didn't know I had. I'm going to respond, I said simply. And I'm going to counterfile. You're countersuing my mother? Yes. For unpaid labor. Mark exhaled shakily. She's going to hate you forever. She already does, I said. There was no bitterness in my voice. Only truth. She just preferred when she could hide it under expectations. The day of the hearing arrived a month later. Small claims court wasn't glamorous. Fluorescent lights, cheap chairs, bored clerks tapping on keyboards. But the air felt charged the way it does right before a storm breaks. Judith arrived wearing her most expensive coat, pearls gleaming, expression carefully arranged into wounded dignity. She even carried tissues as if she planned to punctuate her testimony with delicate tears. She didn't look at me. Not once. But she did glance at Mark, who sat beside me. His presence was a silent declaration, and it rattled her. The judge called our case. Judith launched into her performance immediately. Your Honor, she began, voice trembling beautifully, my daughter-in-law has become unhinged. She sent me a fraudulent invoice for nearly $5,000. She is trying to extort money from me, an elderly woman on a fixed income. I didn't react. Neither did the judge. Furthermore, Judith continued, growing bolder, I relied on her help because we are family. She has never charged before. She has never. Ms. Morgan, the judge interrupted gently, did Ms. Carter, he nodded to me, ever agree verbally or in writing to provide these services for free? Judith blinked rapidly. Well, not verbally. But she understood. We had an arrangement. She helped. I supervised. Supervision, the judge said calmly, does not constitute payment. Judith faltered. The judge turned to me. Ms. Carter, your response? I stood hand steady. Your Honor, I provided documented labor over several months. The tasks were not optional. They were demanded. I was told repeatedly to appear on specific dates and times. I have every message, every timestamp, every photo. I lifted a folder. Thick, organized, undeniable. Here is evidence of all 81 hours of work performed. Judith gasped, offended. She's exaggerating. The judge raised a hand. Ms. Morgan, please let her finish. I continued. I asked for compensation only after realizing the extent of what was expected of me and the impact it had on my time, job, and well-being. I am countersuing for unpaid labor at standard market rates. Judith exploded. This is outrageous. She's family. The judge looked at her with a calm that cut deeper than anger. Family, he said, is not a legal defense for unpaid labor. Silence fell. Heavy. Pure. Judith's face drained of color. The judge reviewed the documents for several long minutes, flipping through the photos. The scratched knuckles, the filthy gloves, the half-finished projects I'd been ordered to complete. Finally he spoke. Judgment in favor of Ms. Carter. Judith's breath hitched. He continued. Ms. Carter's documentation is thorough and consistent. Ms. Morgan, you are ordered to pay the full invoiced amount of $4,862.50 within 30 days. A single tear escaped Judith's eye, not out of sorrow. Out of humiliation. Mark placed a shaky hand on my back. Not ownership. Not pity. Support. Judith stood abruptly. You'll regret this, she whispered, voice trembling. Both of you. But it wasn't a threat anymore. It was the sound of someone realizing the world she controlled had finally slipped from her grasp. And there was no going back. Judith didn't speak to us as we left the courthouse. Not a word. Not a glare. Not even the dramatic huff she usually deployed when she wanted everyone to know she'd suffered a great injustice. She just turned sharply on her heel and marched toward the parking lot, heels clicking like brittle little gunshots on the pavement. Her posture was stiff, her shoulders trembling, not from anger alone, but from something far more foreign to her. Defeat. Mark and I walked in silence to the car. He kept glancing at me like he expected me to crumble or explode or second-guess everything the moment we stepped outside. That used to be my pattern. Doubt myself until I decided my own boundaries were unreasonable. But not this time. When we got in the car, Mark finally spoke. I didn't think it would go like that. How did you think it would go? I asked gently. He stared at the dashboard. I thought, the judge would tell you both to work it out. Or that he'd say it wasn't a legal matter. Or, he swallowed. Or that you were overreacting. I didn't flinch. And now? Mark's shoulders slumped, but not in defeat. More like acceptance, long overdue. Now I realize you've been doing the work of a whole crew, he said quietly. And she just expected it. I didn't want to see it. It was the closest he had ever come to admitting how deep his mother's influence ran. I nodded. I know. We pulled out of the parking lot, driving in silence until Mark exhaled deeply. What happens now? A fair question. One I'd been asking myself for weeks. But the answer felt clearer now than ever. She pays, I said. And then we set boundaries. Real ones. And if she doesn't? He asked. I turned to him. Then the court will enforce the judgment. He swallowed again. She's going to be furious. She already is, I said softly. And she will be for a long time. But her anger isn't my responsibility anymore. That sentence, my responsibility, felt heavier leaving my lips than I expected. It was the centerpiece of my entire life, the axis I'd unknowingly lived around for years. Judith had always made her emotions my job. Her guilt my burden. Her disappointment my problem. Her chores my weekends. But not anymore. The money arrived 10 days later. A cashier's check delivered by certified mail with no note attached. Judith hadn't even signed the envelope herself. Mark recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from a neighbor who sometimes ran errands for her. Classic Judith. Always reaching for dignity even when she'd lost the battle. I held the envelope for a long moment, feeling neither triumph nor spite, just a strange, steady calm. This check wasn't revenge. It wasn't victory. It wasn't even compensation really. It was a symbol. A symbol that Judith had finally, begrudgingly, unwillingly acknowledged something she'd denied for years. My time had value. I opened the envelope and placed the check on the counter. Do you want to tell her we received it? I asked Mark. He inhaled sharply. No, he said. No. I don't think she wants to hear from us right now. And I realized something else. Something that settled over me like sunlight breaking through cloud cover. We didn't owe her anything. Not acknowledgement. Not gratitude. Not a conversation. Nothing. Judith had always demanded closure on her terms. This time, silence was the only closure she deserved. The next week, the repairs she had postponed for months, those she had refused to hire professionals for because Emily can do it, finally began. A landscaping truck appeared in her driveway at 8 a.m. The gutters were done by noon. Her hedges were trimmed evenly for the first time in years. A small part of me wondered how she felt watching strangers do the work she once barked orders at me to complete. Another part of me didn't care. That evening, Mark received a text from her. Tell Emily I paid the bill. But I hope she's happy. She's destroyed this family. Mark stared at his phone for a long time. Do you want me to respond? He asked. I shook my head. No. He didn't respond. Judith didn't message again. For the first time since marrying into the Morgan family, I sat on my couch with a cup of tea and the unfamiliar sensation of a weekend stretching ahead of me, completely my own. No lists. No demands. No guilt. No Judith. Just my time. The quiet felt new, strange, precious. I had fought, really fought, for my right to live a life not dictated by someone else's entitlement. And for the first time in years, I won. The first Saturday after the judgment felt unreal. I woke up around 9, sunlight spilling through the curtains, the soft hum of our neighborhood drifting through the open window. No alarm. No dread. No mental checklist of gutters, weeds, driveways, and hedges tightening around my ribs before I even got out of bed. Just quiet. I lay there for a long moment, listening to nothing, letting the unfamiliar peace settle into my bones. It felt like waking up in someone else's life, A calmer, gentler one, until I realized, oh, this was mine. It had always been mine. I had simply given too much of it away. When I got up, Mark was already in the kitchen pouring coffee. He glanced at me with a small, careful smile. Sleep well. Better than I have in months, I admitted. He nodded, looking down at the coffee pot. It feels strange. Not having all that hanging over us. Over us. Not over me. That meant more than he realized. We sat at the table together, sipping coffee in a silence that for once felt companionable rather than strained. We didn't talk about Judith. We didn't talk about court. We didn't talk about the check pinned to our refrigerator with a magnet. A symbol, not a trophy. We just sat. We breathed. We existed without expectation. And that was enough. Judith, of course, didn't disappear quietly. In the weeks that followed, she sent messages occasionally. Never to me, always to Mark. Each one was a variation of the same tired refrain. Your wife has ruined everything. We were a family before she drove a wedge between us. I hope she's proud of herself. Don't expect me to babysit, visit, or help ever again. The last message made me laugh. Judith hadn't helped with a single thing since I'd known her. Mark stopped reading the messages out loud. Then he stopped opening them at all. Eventually she stopped sending them. Control is a powerful drug for someone like Judith. Once she realized she no longer had any left, the withdrawal was loud. Then pitiful. Then quiet. The final stage, silence. And for the first time in our marriage, that silence wasn't frightening. It was freeing. Months passed. I found myself rediscovering the pieces of my life I hadn't realized were missing. I took a cooking class on Saturday mornings. I spent entire afternoons reading on the couch. I worked in my garden. My actual garden, not Judith's, planting herbs and vegetables and flowers I'd always wanted but never had time for. Every time I held a small trowel in my hand, I felt the difference like a physical truth. This wasn't obligation. This wasn't guilt. This wasn't servitude. This was choice. One evening, as I watered a row of lavender, Mark came outside and leaned against the porch railing. You look happy, he said softly. I am, I replied, surprised by how easily the words came. He hesitated. I'm sorry I didn't see it earlier. How much she was asking of you. How much I let her ask. I met his gaze. You see it now. He nodded. And I won't let it happen again. The promise wasn't dramatic. It wasn't wrapped in tears or speeches. It was simple. Grounded. And it was enough. 1 year after I sent the invoice, I stood in my garden, a small, blooming patch of earth that finally felt like mine, and realized something. The real victory wasn't the check Judith mailed. It wasn't the judgment. It wasn't the end of her demands. The real victory was this. I had stopped apologizing for my own boundaries. I had stopped sacrificing my peace to keep someone else comfortable. I had stopped believing that being good meant being used. Judith hadn't just lost a free worker. She lost her hold on me, her claim to my time, her grip on my guilt. And in letting her lose all that, I gained something far more valuable. A life that belonged to me again. Quiet. Spacious. My time was no longer free. And it never would be again.